Welcome back to Fort Worth Crosstalk. I'm with Rob again. You can follow Rob at on Twitter or actually whatever we're calling it today at Rob Loves JC. And we're going to get into the moral bankruptcy, the moral problem with atheism. Atheism is stupid, and we're going to get into the moral issue with atheism. I'm going to kick it over to Rob. Rob, why don't you introduce yourself, tell everyone what you've been up to, and what you've been busy with.
Okay, thanks, Gary. I'm glad to be back on your show again. My name is Rob Loves. As Gary said, my handle on Twitter is Rob Loves JC. You can also find me at my own YouTube channel under my own first full name and last name, which is Roberts and Gruen. My last name is Groen. And this week on Tuesday, I debated Steve McCurry. I think that's roughly how that's the last name is pronounced. But anyways, I debated him on the epistemology of atheism. He's agnostic. And then I debated Jackson Wheat yesterday on evolution versus creation. He's agnostic, atheist, evolutionist. So, and then I'm also in the process of writing a book, but I kind of put that on the back burner in terms of debates and everything else that's been going on this week. And I'm also doing a video hangout tomorrow evening at 9 p.m. Central Standard Time or 10 p.m. Eastern Standard Time with Arn Ra.
Oh, okay. He's obnoxious, but that should be good.
Yeah, I've seen him be okay. Like I think when I don't know if you saw his debate with the Nettle or Cliff and Stewart, and he was hammered. But when he's sober, he's not too bad.
Let's get into the moral problem with atheism. So I just recently had a conversation with an atheist where they told me that there are no absolutes. And then I got into, are you absolutely sure about that? And
yeah, so what did you say
now you've got a dilemma you can't answer. Either you say, yes, I'm absolutely sure there's no absolutes.
You just hung yourself by saying that.
Or no, I'm not absolutely sure, which means there certainly could be absolutes. So either way, that's a mental brick wall which atheists, because it's a stupid philosophy, will always.
Yeah, but how did the atheist respond when you asked him how you're absolutely sure of
that? He said that he was absolutely sure. Then we get into that, but yeah,
he's absolutely sure that there are no absolutes.
There's absolutes. Well, okay, well that's the only absolute. Well, that's
how do you
two.
know?
You're absolutely sure, and that's the only absolute. So that is two absolutes.
And how can you be sure that's the only absolute about? And how can you know that?
Yeah, are you absolutely sure you know that, right? And it just.
Well, how can you be absolutely certain that that's the only absolute that there is?
And before we get right, as I was saying, you know a lot of things for absolute, right? You're absolutely sure of a lot of things, and me and Rob were talking about this. As a Christian, if you have a Christian worldview, and you're in the West, you're in the U.S., Texas, you're in Canada, you're anywhere in the West, Europe, you were indoctrinated with an atheist worldview from the time you walked in to kindergarten in public school, and you were just smart enough or intellectual enough to look at that worldview and be like, nah, that's a pass for me. That doesn't make any sense. I'm going to pass on that.
I've always been.
Let me get into this, right? The atheist was not smart enough to realize that this is a ridiculous worldview. They didn't have the intellectual curiosity or the intellectual courage, or the critical thinking skills to really look at that and be like, no, this doesn't make any sense. There's too many problems with this. So they just blindly accept, that religious belief and what they're told. And Rob, I'm going to kick it over to you because I know you've been debating with Darwinists and things like that.
Yeah. So I think I'm just going to comment a few things what you just said, kind of lay kind of the groundwork. Well, first of all, I've never been the kind of person that just accepts things just because it's popular or because other people do. That's not. I've never lived my life like that, and and of course I've taken flack for it because I hold to we hold to convictions that are just not culturally or societally popular. It's not popular to be a Christian in the West anymore. I mean, there's still a fair amount of Christians in the West, but we're not popular. And again, like I said, I've never lived my life according to what people consider popular or acceptable. If it doesn't make sense to me, I just won't accept it. And secondly, I think that statistics prove that the overwhelming majority of people unquestionably believe the combination of what they've been taught as children and what culture deems as the norm. So atheism is obviously culturally kind of hip and cool right now, right? So it's like I actually have a friend who says whatever it says I agree with whatever the current trend is. I agree with it. Like it's obviously just tongue in cheek, but
the people with the mask profile, the people with getting vaccinated, they have an Israel and a Ukraine flag. It's all the same people. Whatever whatever the
of course,
yeah.
And of course, is the thing is like this. What that shirt is mocking is the idea that people just blindly believe whatever the culture says.
Rob, you know that better than anyone during COVID living in Canada. People will just follow whatever they're told. Like, it doesn't matter how stupid it is. They will follow it if that's what they're told to do.
And for me, like it was very obvious about COVID. Like everyone just bowed and got the vaccine, pretty well except for me.
And
I took a lot.
So losing your rights, losing privileges, losing everything. I'm not. Yeah, you were. And I've never met one unvaccinated person who says, "Oh, I wish I could have it back and go." Like no one regrets it. But I wanted to get
no one regrets not taking it. That's what you're saying,
person, right? Not a single person.
I know.
But I wanted to get back into the moral problem. I
just want to say one thing quickly before we go into the moral argument. That I think the what happened with COVID was the first. The thing is, I've had actual vaccines in my life, like just to travel. Like I went to El Salvador a number of years ago, and I had to get like the polio vaccine and like I think a couple others. And the thing is, like we have to realize that first of all, the definition of a vaccine is actually a small dose of the virus itself. That COVID vaccine wasn't a small dose of the virus itself. It was something else.
Yeah, it's experimental gene therapy, and they just call it.
Yeah, and
they changed the definition of vaccine a vaccine.
Yeah. And there was just too many things about it that I was noticing in what was going on in the world, and just things just didn't add up.
It really didn't, and we're seeing now, the truth come out.
Anyways, yes, we'll just leave that for now. And I just wanted to say those things, and then we can go jump into the moral argument now.
We'll get into the moral argument, and the way I like to put it is just simple. If there are moral absolute, there's an absolute moral lawgiver. That moral lawgiver must be all-knowing, all knowledgeable, and all moral.
Yeah,
so that's
and some foolish atheist on my YouTube channel said just because there's moral absolutes doesn't mean there's a moral lawgiver. I'm like, do you realize what you just said?
Yeah, and that's interesting, right? Because where do laws come from? If this moral laws, if something is absolutely immoral, says who? Right? And where do laws come from? All laws come from lawgivers, right? Like there was a law in Canada that you had to wear a mask. It comes from a lawgiver. It didn't just pop into society naturally. It comes from a lawgiver. So if
what he's doing is he's breaking the law of non-contradiction.
Yeah. Well, but why don't you explain that a little bit? Explain, I'm sure most of the listeners know what the law of non-contradiction is, but just kind of,
Okay. So again, like I said, there's it doesn't matter who it was, but somebody on my YouTube channel said just because there's moral absolutes doesn't mean there's a moral lawgiver. When I say that's not the law that breaks the law of non-contradiction. Law of non-contradiction basically just states that two things can't be true and false at the same time.
Right, so in other words, be Tuesday and not Tuesday on the same
day.
Yeah,
exactly. Right? So it can't be Tuesday and Thursday at the same time. That would be breaking the law of non-contradiction. They can't both be equally true at the same time. So for someone to say that there are moral absolutes, but that doesn't mean there's a moral lawgiver, well, that breaks the law of non-contradiction because, as Gary rightly pointed out, moral laws come from moral lawgivers. Like even if you look at the human legal system, all our laws come from people who make the laws, lawgivers. And that, why would that be any different in the metaphysical with God? So, and even in order for us to have moral absolutes, the standard of morality can't be human. Otherwise, it's just every man for himself, and it's just a matter of opinion. So it's like my morality isn't better or worse than your morality. It's just my preference. And
Right.
so, the moral absolute standard means that there has to be a moral lawgiver, at least one moral lawgiver, because more laws come from lawgivers. Secondly, the standard of morality can't be human because then it would be subjective. So the moral lawgiver has to be, first of all, a non-human being that supersedes humanity's subjective moral thinking, and it has to be morally, and then the moral lawgiver, him or herself, whatever it is, has to be morally perfect himself, because he's the essence and standard of all morality. Does that make sense?
It makes perfect sense to me, but that's why I don't have an atheist worldview, right? I hope it makes sense to the listeners. And like, I'm going to use the Holocaust example again when I was talking to an atheist, and basically the atheist had to concede that no, the Holocaust isn't absolutely immoral, right? It's like he's got a dilemma here where it's either absolutely moral and then there are absolutes. I can't have that. Or, and this is, if you look at the countries that have done atheism as their state religion, they're all heinous countries. They're not a decent one. The French Revolution, Cuba, China, right? The communist bloc, right? These are heinous countries that murdered millions of people. Because there's no moral right or wrong, right? So why not murder 100 million people?
And so a lot of atheists have tried to argue with me that we'll just have a top-down hierarchy of moral values. Like, obviously, everyone. Wait a second. What if the top-down value of a moral hierarchy will be contrary too? Because obviously that's happened. Like, I mean, look at World War II in Germany. Obviously, Hitler thought that wiping out the Jews was just speeding up the process of evolutionary natural selection. So obviously, his morality wouldn't agree with that top-down morality of hierarchy values.
Right, and morally, God has written His law upon your heart. Right, you can know God before you even know God, because He's written His law upon your heart. So when the atheist says that the Holocaust is not absolutely wrong, it's not absolutely immoral, he's saying what he knows to be not true. Who says things that let me just finish. Who says things they know are not true? Very weak men say things they know are not true. Yeah. What is most of the world's problems? Very weak.
Suppressing the truth and unrighteousness, as Paul says.
The atheist religion is made up of very weak. If you look at the countries that atheism is a state religion, it's very weak.
Basically China and Russia.
China, Russia, Cuba, Mexico for a time, right?
North
Korea, right? So it's very weak men, and very weak men cause most of the world's problems. It's not that
and the thing is, the country where atheism is like the state religion are all horribly economically, politically, horrible.
They all have, almost all of them have convert or die policy. Some will convert or be in
prison. Yeah, and the thing is, no atheist in the Western world would ever want to live in the countries that actually have atheism as the state religion.
Not coming from, a Western country, because Western countries were built by very strong men. Now that's changing in rapid speed in lifetime.
Yeah, I mean, we live in a pluralistic society now. We live in like anything goes kind of world, which is just as problematic as an atheistic state, but differently.
In the U.S., I say we live in an anti-Christian post-constitutional time, and you can see.
Yeah. I mean, I think the climate in Canada is way more secular here. We're probably like looking at like 75 or 80% of the population is not Christian for certain, and most likely secular.
Which is crazy, because you go back to your grandparents' generation, you go back 2 generations.
Yeah, like in the 1950s,
is one of, if not the most Christianized country in the world. And
in the 1950s, you're probably looking at least in 1950s. I think you have at least 50 to 60% of people going to church. Maybe not 60%, at least going to church.
60% surveyed said they go to church weekly. Now,
yeah, I mean, of course, that has a major effect on the rest of your life.
And that takes us to moral without God. You will always get this with atheists, and it's nonsensical, right?
You can't. It's impossible to
Moral
be
by
moral
what
without.
standard, right? Like, if morality just becomes, without an ultimate standard, morality just becomes preference. It's just a preference.
Well, the thing is, the atheist will always say, "I don't need God to be moral, or to know morality."
By what standard? Moral by
Yeah,
what
but
standard? They don't have
the
an
thing
answer.
is, you can't. The thing is, your morality comes from God, so it's a stupid thing to say to begin with.
Right,
But
God made you an image bearer. God made you in His image.
Hmm.
It's immoral to be a liar because God's not a liar, right? It's immoral.
Yeah.
It's not because God said so. It's because that's who God is, and God made you to be like Him, right? It's like programming a computer piece and saying,
Yeah. I mean,
you program, and now you have free
if
will, and you can do what you want with that, and you can go and sin, and you can, but ultimately, you know that you're wrong, right?
Mhm. I mean, if I look at at least 90% of the comments that are made by non-believers on my YouTube channel, they're about 90% of them are straw man. They're just attack. They're just like, you don't know what you're talking about. You don't have an education, or you don't read, which I find is hilarious because I've been reading all my life.
Yeah, I've never met an atheist who's read a book since high school, honestly, right? I mean, they're
And
just
the thing is, too, is
fundamentally
like,
unserious people.
yeah, I mean, too, is like, and the thing is, how would you know that I don't read?
Like, I'm handling you in this debate, so that's really an indictment on you. If I don't read books, I'm handling you in this debate. What does that say about you? Right? Like, and
I mean, that's the thing is too, is it's obviously just a comment from ignorance, because there's no way these people could know if I read or not.
yeah, and it's they've got some stereotype of a Christian in their head who doesn't know anything, right? Like, they've created this.
Well, the thing is too, and that's why I really don't give a crap, because they're not insulting me. They're insulting the idea of who they think I am.
Right, and that's why I don't care if they laugh at me. And
Yeah,
I don't
exactly.
care. Yeah, like, they're already laughing at you, and you
Like,
get this.
the thing is, like, they're attacking a character of me in their own making imagination. So why would I concern myself with something that I'm not?
And I don't care if they get mad at me, right? I don't
Actually,
care.
I think I the more they get mad at me and hostile towards me, especially my YouTube comment, I'll start trolling back by saying, "Oh, this guy, he doesn't know anything. He thinks he has an argument." I'm like, "Yeah, I appreciate the compliment that I have an argument."
You you'll get this, and people like, and there are many Christians who are just afraid to upset an atheist. It's like, why? Right? They're like,
I don't
is
know.
homosexuality a sin? It's an
Yes,
abomination. It's an
of
abomination.
course.
It's disgusting. It's vile. It's degrading to all society. And there's no biological evolutionary upside to it. So if your worldview was correct, it'd be obsolete, because there's no evolutionary benefit to it, right?
Well, and the
So
thing is, I mean, yeah, like you said, like if
so many
everyone was
Christians are afraid
homosexual,
to
if
say that.
everyone turned homosexual, our species would be extinct in under
It'd
50
be
years.
extinct in one generation. Yeah, right. So we inherently know that it's wrong,
Yeah,
right?
and that's why it's called unnatural, because you can't reproduce with someone of the same sex.
It's also vile, disease
Yeah, it's
spreader.
disgusting.
It's disgusting. Yeah.
And I mean, just on the face of it, you can't reproduce in the same sex relationship.
Right. And then just, I'm not going to do it here because it's too graphic, but explain what they do to each other. And you're like, stop, that's gross. I know.
I don't want to know.
I fully understand that it is. You're the one saying it's okay.
I don't want to know. I don't want to know what it was. Is like, as soon as it's like this, like, I don't know what to know.
Yeah, it's disgusting what they do to each other.
Actually, I don't even know
I don't even
want to know the thoughts that are going in your head when this comes from going from this to this.
So,
because I know they ain't good.
Yeah.
On the other hand, I saw a Christian yesterday that wrote that every single atheist is either gay or bi. I'm like, oh god, that's just.
I don't know. Like, there are most people depart from Christ. Oh, not most. I don't know. A lot of people depart from Christ. Me and Rob talking about this because of sexual perversion, right? So
yeah, and the thing is, what I made the argument that if you reject God, you certainly open the door from deviation from heterosexuality, but it's not definitive.
Right. Yeah.
And that's the argument. And the guy used trying to use Romans 1 as an argument for like everyone who rejects God will deviate from the natural order of things. I'm like, listen, that like I said, it definitely opens a door for it. So it's the premise of it, but to say that every atheist who rejects God will end up fire gate, that's just dumb.
Although, yeah, the sexual and immoral are definitely outside the gate.
The thing is, like, you can be, I can retain my heterosexuality and just sleep with as many women as I want.
And you'll also end up outside. Yeah, that's still sexual perversion. I'm not condoning that, by the way. I'm
just saying that you can retain your heterosexuality and still go off the deep end.
Absolutely.
So this guy was.
God gives us parameters for sex.
That's this guy usually. This guy usually says something. But when I say Christians saying stupid crap like that, I just call it it.
Right. And
I just told him, like, because I was embarrassed, like, you like, you're a Christian, you're gonna say something as dumb as all atheists are gay or bi. I was blown. I said, bro, this is a dumbass comment. Delete this shit.
It is. So ultimately, what it comes down to is, and let me get this: if there are moral absolutes, then there has to be an absolute standard and absolute lawgiver. If there's not moral absolutes, then there's no morals at all. Then it's just preferences. Like, for example, if I like vanilla and Rob likes chocolate, no one would say that either of us are immoral. We just have different preferences. If I like Kobe better than Bron and Rob likes Bron better than Kobe, no one's being immoral. Immoral by definition.
Yeah, but we're not making the argument. We're just talking about preferences.
Immoral by definition has to be absolute. Otherwise, it's just preferences. Preferences aren't morality. Vanilla over chocolate, chocolate over vanilla, tacos over pizza, or pizza over tacos is not moral.
It's always It's always interesting that atheists will bring up the immorality of the God of the Old Testament, right?
Immoral by what standard, right? And then they have to borrow from Christianity.
Yeah.
So
it's double talk. They're just being hypocritical, of course.
Next time an atheist brings up the immorality of the Old Testament, point out to them that that's Jewish law, that's a Jewish story. Watch their demeanor change instantly.
Well, I used that argument. I said, just because you pass a law in Texas doesn't mean it applies to Arizona.
Yeah, it says that, first of all, like, when they go through Leviticus, it's not applicable to me, right? Like, I don't know what the speed limit is where Rob lives, but in the U.S., it's in Texas. The speed limit's 85 miles an hour in some rural places. You go outside of Texas,
well, the thing is,
it's 55 or 65.
Well, the thing is, we're using different standards. You guys use miles, we use kilometers.
It's a different standard, and that law is no longer applicable.
And there's 1.6 kilometers to the mile.
I'm not doing the math on that. But
so 10 miles an hour.
Right. Yeah.
No, so we'll just say 10 miles an hour is 16 kilometers an hour.
So ultimately, if there's an absolute standard of morality, there has to be an absolute standard there has to be a moral lawgiver. If there is no absolute morals don't exist at all. Morals can't be subjective. Otherwise, it's not morality. It's just a list of things you like pizza and Kobe Bryant and vanilla ice cream.
Yeah, so I'd like to set up the problem of morality. So I would like to set up the straw man and then knock it down, if I may.
Go ahead.
Okay, so as we've already, Gary and I briefly touched on this. Was it 2 or 3? I think this is our 3rd or 4th episode now together. I think it's our 3rd, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, 3rd. Yeah. So the 2 episodes ago, the first one we kind of broadly touched on the overall stupidity of atheism. I just mentioned quickly that the problem with atheism morality, in top of mentioned the other 3 things, but just because this one we're just going to talk about morality, I'll stick to that. That as we've already said, to establish that in order for morality to be objective, first of all, it can't be human, because then if the standard is human, it's subjective and arbitrary. So the standard for morality, in order to be objective, has to be a non-human being that is above humanity. It has to be timeless, spaceless, and immaterial, and we call this being God. The other thing is the reason that that morality is a problem for atheism is because it rules God's existence out of the equation. Now it's a subjective standard. So, of course, the problem with the subjective standard is you can't make objective claims in a philosophically subjective worldview, which atheism by default is. So when atheists say something is wrong, me and Gary will have to say immediately, by what standard? So you can't use, again, a philosophically subjective worldview to measure morality objectively. And the problem with that is every morals are objective, and atheists know this, but they can't be consistent within their own worldview and say something is immoral without shooting themselves in the philosophical foot.
It's a self-defeating worldview, because once you say that there's no moral absolute, there's no moral standard, then if one person says the Holocaust is moral, and the other person says it's immoral, who's right and who's wrong?
Yeah,
right? With the Christian foundation, with a Christian worldview, I have a platform to stand on that I can say the Holocaust is just as wrong as the person that says 2 + 2 = 7. They're just as wrong. They're absolutely wrong. As an atheist, you don't really have a moral, you don't have a platform to say either are wrong, but specifically in this case, the morality that the Holocaust is absolutely wrong. You can't. So now you're stuck saying things that you know aren't true. And ultimately, what is atheism but a religion that gets you to say things you know aren't true, so that you can say the ultimate thing isn't true? You can say that there is no God, which is the ultimate untrue thing to say. It's atheism is just prep work to get you to say things you know aren't true.
Well, you
used to be a monkey. You know that's not true.
Here's the even bigger problem with atheism. How can you know that God doesn't exist when he's immaterial?
Right, and like you would have to have all knowledge to know that.
And like you said before, you'd have to be able to be at all places at all times.
You'd have to have all knowledge. Well, that's one of the defining characteristics.
And the only way to have all knowledge is to be at all places at all times, right?
How do you know that God doesn't exist in the knowledge that you don't have? And I had a debate with an atheist once, and I said, does God exist? And he said, no. I said, do you have all knowledge? And obviously, no. I said, well, how do you know God doesn't exist in the knowledge you don't have? Right? There's no answer. You can't answer that. So it's a ridiculous, self-defeating statement. It's ridiculous.
Yeah, and this reminds me of like the debate that Aaron Ra had with Clifton Stewart, who he's like, he actually said, well, he was getting hammered and belligerent, so that didn't help his case either. But he's saying, yes, I do. I knew Clint's right, and you're wrong, and I'm right. And I'm like, oh.
So ultimately, if there's no moral absolute, there's no moral standard, and nothing is moral or immoral. It's all preferences, and preferences aren't morality.
But of course, Aaron, sorry, his name is pronounced Aaron, not Aaron. Aaron Ra never defended how he knew that God didn't exist. It's just that he knows that he doesn't for some.
Okay, if that's your claim, and this you'll get into this with atheists. Atheists will say a God doesn't exist, which is a negative claim, and they say you can't prove a negative. Yes, you can. Yes, you can. You can absolutely prove a negative. There are no Shintos in the Texas State Senate. I go through each state senator, no Shintos. There is no $1 million bill in my wallet. I go through my wallet, I take everything out. No $1 million bill. I've just proved negatives. This idea that, and this is just something stupid that they say 2 + 2 doesn't equal 7. I get 4 coconuts, put 2 over here, 2 over there, push them together. 1, 2, 3, 4. 4. 2 + 2 = 4. 4 is not 7. 2 + 2 doesn't equal 7. I just proved another negative. This is not. I can prove negatives all day. It's not complicated, and you'll always get this as an atheist argument that you can't prove a negative. I just did it. Now you can't prove an absolute negative without world knowledge.
I'm going to send you 3 links. I'm going to send you the debates, and I did a video this morning on evolution is stupid.
It's quite stupid. Rob, we're gonna.
And the thing is that I got to obviously, because I was recording myself, I got to say some of my thoughts, obviously, without being interrupted, which I can't ever do with these people. they just suck at listening, man.
I think we've driven home the point. Rob, we'll get together again next week. We're gonna wrap up now. Let everyone know where they can find you, and what, yeah, let everyone, and the links to those videos will be in the description.
Okay, yeah. So again, you can find me on Twitter at my handle is at Rob Loves JC on Twitter, or I guess what's formerly known as Twitter, now known as Next. And you can find me on my YouTube channel at Robert Groen. My last name is spelled Groen. Yeah, those are the two places you can find me. And I've done debates on the Non Sequitur show with John McCrae and Jackson Wheat on his YouTube channel as well. And you can find my debates. Well, I've posted them, and there's, I think between the two of them, there's over 1,000 views now in 2 days. So that's something.
All right, Rob. Thank you for your time. It is January 25th, 2024, from Texas to the world. Thank you, and God bless.